Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. The muzzle of the gun wasn't cold against his temple. It was burning hot, a searing reminder that Julian's life was currently being weighed against a stack of bearer bonds and a suitcase of heroin. Rain hammered against the corrugated metal roof of the abandoned shipyard warehouse, a deafening drum roll to the end of his existence. He didn't dare breathe. He didn't dare blink. He only stared at the polished Italian leather shoes of the man sitting on the velvet armchair in the center of the filth, a throne amidst the debris. 3 million, the man in the chair said. His voice was a low rumble, like a cello played in a mausoleum. That is the price of your incompetence, Arthur. And you offer me this. Julian flinched as his father, his own flesh and blood, shoved him forward into the mud. The impact knocked the wind out of him, his thin dress shirt instantly soaking up the grime of the floor. He's pretty, Lord Thorne. Look at him. Arthur Vane's voice cracked, desperate and pathetic. He's untouched. Educated. He can be whatever you need him to be. A servant. A warmer. Just take him and wipe the slate clean. Please. Julian looked up, mud streaking his pale cheek, and locked eyes with Cassian Thorne, the king of the underworld, the viper of the east. Cassian leaned forward, the shadows peeling away from his face. He was devastatingly handsome, with sharp, aristocratic features and eyes the color of shattered obsidian. He didn't look at Julian with lust. He looked at him with the clinical curiosity of a predator inspecting a wounded bird. A son for a debt, Cassian mused, standing up. He towered over them, his black trench coat billowing slightly in the draft. You would sell your own blood to save your fingers, Arthur? He's useless to me otherwise. Arthur squealed. Cassian's gaze dropped to Julian. Stand up, boy. Julian's legs trembled, but he forced himself upright. He was slender, with messy ash-brown hair and wide, terrified amber eyes that betrayed a softness the world hadn't yet crushed. Cassian stepped closer, his gloved hand reaching out to tilt Julian's chin up. The leather was smooth, the grip iron firm. If I take him, Cassian whispered, his voice dangerously soft, he belongs to the dark. He ceases to be your son. He ceases to be a citizen. He becomes mine. To break. To keep. To discard. Yes. Yes, take him. Arthur cried. Cassian stared into Julian's eyes, searching for something. Julian expected to see cruelty. Instead, for a fleeting nanosecond, he saw a flash of shared contempt for the man groveling on the floor. Done, Cassian said. He snapped his fingers. 2 guards seized Arthur, dragging him toward the exit. Wait. The debt is cleared, right? Arthur shouted over his shoulder, not once looking back at the son he had just bartered away. The debt is cleared, Cassian said dismissively, as the heavy iron doors slammed shut, sealing the noise of the storm outside. Cassian turned his full attention to Julian. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Do you hate him? Cassian asked. Julian swallowed the lump in his throat. He is my father. That wasn't the question. Cassian removed his gloves, finger by finger, revealing scarred, capable hands. Do you hate him for selling you to a monster? Julian looked at the gun still resting on the side table. Then he looked at Cassian. I hate him, Julian whispered, the truth tasting like copper on his tongue. But I hate myself more for hoping you would take the deal. Cassian's lips curved into a ghost of a smile. Honesty. A rare currency in my line of work. Come, Julian. Let us see if you survive the night. The Thorne estate was not a house. It was a fortress disguised as a Gothic cathedral. Perched on the cliffs overlooking the churning sea, it was a monolith of black stone and glass. Julian had expected a dungeon. He had expected chains, a cold basement, the harsh reality of being a debt slave. Instead, he was standing in a bedroom larger than his father's entire apartment. The walls were lined with silk, the floors covered in Persian rugs that cost more than Julian's life. This is your cage, Cassian said, standing in the doorway. He had shed the trench coat, revealing a tailored charcoal 3-piece suit that accentuated the breadth of his shoulders and the taper of his waist. Julian stood in the center of the room, hugging himself. What? What do you want me to do? Do. Cassian walked to a crystal decanter on a side table and poured a glass of amber liquid. 2. Pay the debt. Julian's voice wavered. He began to unbutton his dirty shirt, his fingers shaking violently. I know what I am here for. I won't fight you. The sound of glass shattering against the wall made Julian jump. Cashin had thrown the tumbler across the room. The whiskey dripped down the silk wallpaper like blood. Button your shirt, Cashin commanded, his voice dropping an octave, vibrating with a terrifying intensity. Julian froze, clutching the fabric to his chest. I don't understand. Cashin crossed the distance between them in 2 long strides. He loomed over Julian, his presence overwhelming, smelling of expensive cologne, tobacco, and rain. He gripped Julian's shoulders, not to hurt, but to stabilize. You think you are here to be a whore? Cashin hissed. You think I traded $3 million for a warm body? I can buy a body on any street corner for the price of a dinner. Then why? Julian breathed, tears pricking his eyes. Because your father is a disease, and I wanted to see if the infection had spread, Cashin said, his eyes scanning Julian's face. You have his name, but you do not have his eyes. You have the eyes of a martyr. Cashin released him, stepping back. You will stay here. You will not leave the grounds. You will eat when I tell you to eat. You will sleep when I tell you to sleep. You belong to me, Julian. And I do not like my possessions to be damaged. Go take a bath. You smell like fear and cheap decisions. With that, the Mafia lord turned and left, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. Julian sank to the floor, his heart hammering against his ribs. He was alive, but he was trapped in the belly of the beast, and the beast was far more complicated than he had ever imagined. Weeks turned into a month. The torture Julian anticipated never came. Instead, the torment was psychological. It was the silence. It was the way Cashin watched him from across the long mahogany dining table, dissecting him with that sharp, obsidian gaze. Julian was given free rein of the library, the gardens, and the music room. He found solace in the grand piano, playing melancholic nocturnes that echoed through the empty halls of the mansion. It was during one of these sessions that the dynamic shifted. Julian was playing Chopin, lost in the turbulent chords, when he sensed a presence. He stopped abruptly, turning to find Cashin leaning against the doorframe, a lit cigarette in his hand. Don't stop, Cashin said. It helps me think. I thought you were in a meeting, Julian said, his voice quiet. I got bored. They were screaming too much. Cashin walked over to the piano, extinguishing the cigarette in a crystal ashtray. He sat on the bench next to Julian, close enough that their thighs brushed. The heat radiating from the man was distracting. You play with a lot of anger, Cashin noted, his eyes on Julian's hands. For a quiet boy, you have loud fingers. It's the only place I'm allowed to scream, Julian replied, surprising himself with his boldness. Cashin chuckled, a low, dark sound. And what are you screaming about, little bird? Your cage is gold. Your food is prepared by a Michelin star chef. You wear silk. It's still a cage, Julian countered, turning to face him. And I don't know when the owner will decide he's tired of the pet. Cashin's expression hardened. He reached out, his hand wrapping around the back of Julian's neck, his thumb stroking the sensitive skin behind his ear. It was a possessive gesture, dominant yet strangely tender. I don't tire of things that intrigue me, Cashin murmured, leaning in. His breath ghosted over Julian's lips. And you, Julian, are becoming a very dangerous obsession. Why dangerous? Julian whispered, his heart racing. He should pull away. He should be terrified. But the magnetic pull of the man was undeniable. Because, Cashin said, his gaze dropping to Julian's lips, in my world, to care for something is to paint a target on its back. And I find myself caring. Before Julian could process the confession, the doors to the music room burst open. Boss, we have a problem. Cashin snapped back, his face instantly transforming from the seductive lover to the ruthless Don. He stood up, shielding Julian with his body. I told you never to interrupt me when I am with him. The guard, a burly man named Rocco, looked pale. It's the serpents. They hit the warehouse at the docks. And they say they have a message regarding the vein debt. Julian felt the blood drain from his face. Cashin buttoned his jacket, his eyes turning into chips of ice. Stay here, he ordered Julian. Lock the door. Do not open it for anyone but me. Cashin, Julian started, reaching out. Cashin paused, looking at Julian's outstretched hand. He took it, brought it to his lips, and kissed the knuckles, a pledge of protection. I will return. I have a pest to exterminate. The attack on the estate came 3 nights later. It wasn't a stealthy infiltration, it was a siege. The Serpents, a rival syndicate known for their brutality, had decided that Cashin's new weakness was the perfect leverage. Explosions rocked the foundation of the manor. Alarm sirens wailed, cutting through the night. Julian was jolted from sleep. The sky outside his window lit up in orange hues of fire. His door flew open. It wasn't Cashin. It was 2 men in black tactical gear, wearing masks with a green serpent emblem. "Found the princess," one shouted. Julian scrambled back against the headboard, grabbing a heavy brass lamp. "Get back!" They lunged. Julian swung the lamp, connecting with a crunch against the first man's helmet, but the second tackled him to the bed. A heavy hand clamped over his mouth, smelling of gasoline and leather. "Quiet, or I slit your throat right here," the man growled, pressing a knife to Julian's neck. "Boss wants you alive, but he didn't say you had to be in one piece." Julian struggled, kicking and scratching, but he was overpowered. They dragged him through the chaotic hallways. Gunfire erupted around them, the sharp cracks of pistols and the stutter of automatic rifles. They reached the grand staircase. Below, the foyer was a war zone. Bodies lay on the marble floor. "Move," the captor shouted, shoving Julian toward the front doors. Suddenly, a shot rang out, louder than the others, a thunderclap that shook the air. The man holding Julian's arm jerked violently, his head snapping back as red mist sprayed into the air. He collapsed, dead before he hit the ground. Julian fell with him, scrambling away from the corpse. He looked up toward the mezzanine. Cashin stood there. He was a vision of beautiful violence. His suit jacket was gone, his white shirt rolled up to the elbows, stained with blood that wasn't his. In his hand was a large, silver Magnum revolver. "Get away from him!" Cashin roared, vaulting over the railing and landing on the floor below with cat-like grace. The remaining intruder raised his weapon toward Julian. Cashin didn't hesitate. He didn't take cover. He walked straight into the line of fire, firing his revolver with terrifying precision. Asterisk bang. Bang. Asterisk. The intruder crumpled. Cashin reached Julian, hauling him up from the floor. He checked him over frantically, his hands leaving bloody prints on Julian's silk pajamas. "Are you hurt? Did they touch you?" I'm okay," Julian stammered, shaking uncontrollably. "Cashin, you're bleeding." There was a graze on Cashin's cheek and a darkening stain on his side. "It's nothing," Cashin growled. "We need to get to the safe room. Now." He dragged Julian toward the hidden panel behind the library bookcase. Once inside the steel-reinforced panic room, the sounds of the battle became muffled thuds. Cashin slumped against the wall, sliding down until he was sitting on the floor. He winced, pressing a hand to his side. "Let me see," Julian said, his fear replaced by a surge of adrenaline. He knelt beside the Mafia boss, prying his hand away. The shirt was soaked in crimson. "It's a through and through," Cashin gritted out, his face pale. "Missed the vitals. Just stings a bit." "You idiot," Julian hissed, tears streaming down his face as he tore a strip from his own pajama top to create a compress. "You walked right into fire." "What?" Cashin looked up, his eyes hazy but intense. He reached up, his bloody hand cupping Julian's cheek, smearing red across the pale skin. "Because," he rasped, "I realized something when I saw them touch you." "What?" Julian pressed hard on the wound, trying to staunch the flow. "That I would burn this entire city to ash before I let anyone take what is mine." Julian froze. The declaration hung in the air, heavy and absolute. "Is that all I am?" Julian asked softly, his voice trembling. "A possession? Something you own?" Cashin's eyes cleared. He grabbed Julian's wrist, stopping his ministrations. "No," he said firmly. "Possessions are replaceable. You are my penance. You are the only clean thing I have ever touched. If you die, the last of my soul dies with you." Julian looked at the man, the killer, the monster, the savior. And in that moment, the Stockholm Syndrome argument died. This wasn't captivity. It was gravity. They were 2 broken celestial bodies crashing into each other. Julian leaned down and pressed his lips to Cashin's. It tasted of iron and smoke. Cashin stiffened for a second, then groaned, his hand tangling in Julian's hair, deepening the kiss with a desperate hunger. It was a kiss of survival, a seal on a blood pact. The cleanup took weeks. The serpents were eradicated, wiped off the map in a campaign of vengeance that the underworld would whisper about for decades. But the final loose end remained. Julian stood in Cashin's office. The morning sun filtered through the bulletproof glass, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. The double doors opened, and Rocco shoved a man inside. Arthur Vane looked worse than before. He was disheveled, bruised, and smelling of cheap alcohol. He stumbled, looking around the opulent office until his eyes landed on Julian. "Julian, my boy," Arthur cried, trying to rush forward, but Rocco held him back. "Oh, thank God. I heard about the attack. I came as soon as I could to negotiate your release. I can't let you stay in this dangerous environment." Julian stood by the window, wearing a suit that matched Cashin's. He didn't flinch. Cashin sat behind his massive oak desk, cleaning his gun. He didn't look up. "He's here for money, Julian. He heard I wiped out the serpents and thinks I'm feeling generous." "That's a lie." Arthur spat. "I'm here for my son." Cashin finally looked up. He placed the gun on the desk. "Ask him, Julian. Ask him if he has the money to buy you back." Julian turned to his father. "Do you?" Arthur faltered. Well, not cash, per se, but I have information. I can be an asset." "Julian, tell him. Tell him we are family." Julian walked slowly toward his father. He stopped a few feet away. "Family," he repeated. "Family protects you. Family doesn't trade you like a used car to settle a gambling debt. I did it to save us." Arthur pleaded. "You did it to save yourself," Julian corrected calmly. He turned to Cashin. "Give me the gun." The room went silent. Rocco's eyes widened. Cashin didn't blink. He slid the revolver across the mahogany surface. Julian picked it up. It was heavy. He turned back to his father. Arthur turned pale. "Julian, what are you doing? Put that down. You're a gentle boy. You're an artist." "I was," Julian said. "But then you gave me to the wolf." Julian raised the gun. His hand didn't shake. "Please," Arthur screamed, falling to his knees. "I'm your father." Julian stared at the man who had caused him a lifetime of pain. He tightened his finger on the trigger. The silence stretched, agonizing and thin. Then, Julian sighed. He lowered the gun. "You're not worth the bullet," Julian said coldly. "And I won't stain his carpet with your filthy blood." Arthur sobbed with relief. "Oh, thank you, son. Thank you." "I'm not your son," Julian cut him off. He turned to Rocco. "Get him out of here. If he ever steps foot in this city again, kill him." "Understood, Mr. Vane," Rocco said with newfound respect. "No," Julian corrected, glancing at Cashin. "It's just Julian. Vane is dead." As Arthur was dragged out, screaming his thanks and pleas, the heavy doors clicked shut. Julian placed the gun back on the desk. He felt drained, hollowed out. Cashin stood up and walked around the desk. He pulled Julian into his arms, wrapping him in warmth and the scent of sandalwood. "You showed mercy," Cashin murmured into his hair. "I wouldn't have. I didn't do it for him," Julian said, resting his head against Cashin's chest, listening to the steady, powerful beat of his heart. "I did it for me. I didn't want my first kill to be out of hate." Cashin pulled back slightly, tilting Julian's chin up. "Your first kill?" "I have a feeling," Julian said, his amber eyes darkening, reflecting the obsidian of Cashin's, "that standing by your side will require a certain flexibility of morals." Cashin smiled, a genuine, blindingly rare smile that transformed his face. "Welcome to the family, Julian." "I wasn't offered to you to save my family," Julian whispered, pulling Cashin down for a kiss. "I was offered to you so I could find my real one." And that is how the gentle bird learned to fly in the storm, and how the ruthless viper found a heart he couldn't bear to stop beating. If you enjoyed seeing Julian take his power back and claim his place on the throne, destroy that like button. And tell me in the comments, would you have pulled the trigger on the father, or was Julian's mercy the ultimate revenge? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then, prompt image. Prompt, masterpiece, best quality, high-res, 1.2. Korean manhwa style, semi-realistic, digital art. 2 men, BL, Yaoi, Man 1. Cashin, tall muscular mafia boss, black slicked hair, sharp jawline, wearing unbuttoned white dress shirt with bloodstains, shoulder holster, protective pose, intense obsidian eyes. Man 2. Julian, slender, messy ash brown hair, wearing oversized silk pajamas, holding a bandage compress against Man 1's chest, looking up with teary amber eyes, expression of love and worry. Background is a dimly lit panic room, steel walls, warm ambient light, emotional atmosphere, cinematic lighting, sharp focus, intricate details.